So today, unfortunately, I have decided to become the Debbie Downer. I'm going to be the contrarian with the hot take, sorry. I think Argenti is the most underwhelming limited 5-star character that Star Rail has released to this date. Now just hold on a minute, I know what you're thinking. Is this guy smoking something? Argenti does so much damage, how could he say he's underwhelming? Well, allow me to explain my take a bit with a little bit of context. When I say he is underwhelming, I am not talking about his strength or meta value or pull value at all. There's absolutely no relation to that. In fact, I agree with most of the community sentiment out there. I think Argenti is a very strong DPS. His multipliers are really big, and with a proper team setup that complements his large energy cost, his teams are some of the top teams that can dish out the most damage that I've seen. And if you are in need of a DPS, he is a very valuable pool, and he will perform really well and will dish out so much damage. So I'm not talking about his strength. Nor am I talking about his aesthetics or VA. I mean, just look at him. I think he looks amazing. I like the knight aesthetic. I think he looks very elegant. I mean, even though he's a dude and I'm a dude, it looks really good. On top of that, his animations in combat are really crisp, and they are very elegant, just like his character design. So no, I don't think his character design or aesthetic is underwhelming. When I say that I think he is the most underwhelming limited 5-star character, I am purely talking about his ability kit as a 5-star limited DPS. So let me just explain by just going over what he does. We can ignore his basic attack, fine, whatever. His skill does damage to all enemies. His ult does damage to all enemies, but he has a gimmick where he can use a 90 cost ult which does less and a 180 cost ult that does more. So his ult does damage. His talent gives crit rate whenever he hits enemies. So it just gives him stats for more damage. This trace gives him a stack of his talent, so more damage. This gives him more damage, and this gives him more energy, so he can do more damage. And that's pretty much it. And here lies my problem and my issue with Argenti's kit. Like, am I missing something? His skill does damage, his ult just does damage, and his talents and traces, his passive abilities, they just give him more damage. So this character, all he does is skill all the time, deal damage, just to ult, deal damage. This is one of the most simplistic kits I've ever seen, and it just feels like there's something missing in his kit to make him a bit more fun, you know? Now, one counter argument that I think that people are going to bring up is, well, all DPS characters just press their button to deal damage and their ult also does damage, so that's pretty much the same thing with Argenti, so why are you complaining? And let me just respond to this by saying, yes, you're pretty much right. All DPS characters, practically all characters, just press their button that does something. DPS deals damage, and their ult also deals damage. We can simplify this whole game's gameplay just by that. But that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that, yes, all kits can be simplified to press button, deal damage, ult also deals damage. But at least every single other character, especially limited characters, has some kind of gimmick or mechanic that we, the player, can play around to make the character more exciting, makes the player go through some more hoops to get to that damage. While Argenti is pretty much only the baseline deal damage with skill, deal damage with ult, with nothing else. So to just visualize my point, let's just go over every single limited character that has been released so far. Kafka applies her own dot and can also proc other characters' dots. Silverwolf is able to implant an elemental weakness that's not originally on the enemy. Luocha has a free passive automatic heal, can remove debuffs from all enemies, and has a healing field. Blade has HP consumption mechanics, deals damage based on HP and how much HP he consumed with his ultimate, and he has a stacking follow-up attack. Jinglu has both a base state and an enhanced state where you want to deal damage in that enhanced state because she has extreme buffs during that time. Seely has a unique resurgence mechanic where she can reset on enemy kills and get extra actions. Topaz has Nummy in the action order, and both her basic attack and skill both count as follow-up attacks that can help proc Nummy, so she can be a sub DPS as well. Jing Yuan has his famous Lightning Lord. Fu Xuan has a unique way of mitigating damage by taking the brunt of that damage herself. Dan Heng in Vibrator Lune can choose to consume more than one SP per turn, 1, 2, or 3, and his ultimate practically gives him free skill points so that he can do more of his SP consumption. And our previous limited character, Huo Huo, is the first healer that can give energy to the entire team. Now I admit, comparing supports isn't the best comparison because supports can bring something new by just giving a new type of buff in their niche. So it's definitely more appropriate to compare Argenti, which is a DPS, with the other limited DPS characters. But even just focusing on the other limited DPS characters, each of them have their own unique mechanic that the player can play around in order to deal that damage. What does Argenti have? Like I said before, his skill only does damage. His passive talent just gives him crit rate when he hits enemies, so you don't have to think about it. And all these traces just enhance what he already does. There's nothing new, there's no extra mechanic that you have to worry about. The only gimmick that this character has is the ultimate. You can choose to either do the low cost ultimate, the 90 energy one, or save for the 180 one. And I think there is potential with this choice. However, at the current moment and just what generally people are saying in their guides, let's be honest here, most of the time you are going to use that 180 ult. The game itself actively disincentivizes the choice of using your low cost ultimate or your high cost ultimate. If you look at the damage values at level 10 between his low cost ultimate and his high cost ultimate, his highest ultimate is way higher than his low cost ultimate. It's like the game is telling you you should choose the high cost ultimate. There are very little scenarios where you actually choose to use the 90 energy ult. So if we think about it that way, his main gimmick from his ult where you actually have a choice, it's a choice that is heavily leaned in favor of one of them, which is actually quite a shame because I feel like his ult is the only ability where the player can choose for themselves how to interact with this character's kit. Everything else is passive, or you have no control over it because a lot of his passive abilities depends on the enemies in the field, how many enemies you hit, so you have no control over that as well. So the one most interesting thing about his kit, in my opinion, which is his ult, where it gives you a choice, there's not really a choice. Now the sad thing is, even if we go just beyond limited 5-star characters and compare with the standard 5-star DPS characters, I think he still loses out. Well, has action delay on his abilities. Clara is the counter DPS, very unique. Himiko, while her base kit is quite boring, at least she has a follow-up attack on break. And Yanqing, while also similarly simplistic, at least he has a gimmick where you want to keep him at high HP and has a follow-up attack. So again, each of these DPS characters has some sort of gimmick except him. In my opinion, his main quote-unquote gimmicks that Hoyoverse is trying to convey are number 1, the amount of enemies in the field, and number 2, his large energy cost. For the first thing, yes, the more enemies there are, the more an erudition character is supposed to do well. Yes, that is pretty obvious. That's not really a gimmick in my opinion. And for the second one, where you have to play around his large energy cost, yes, that is a gimmick that we have to play around, but building a team around a DPS character's ultimate is not unique to Argenti. Every character in this game has an ultimate, some more important than others, that we have to play around because those ultimates are strong. It is not unique to Argenti. So playing around his large ultimate, to me, isn't really a special thing that we have to play around because of his kit. So because of these reasons, I just feel somewhat underwhelmed or a little bit disappointed in Argenti's actual kit as a whole. I feel like there are 2 reasons for Hoyo doing this. Number 1, they just didn't care about Argenti, which is kind of sad, and they just kept them like this, kind of simple. The other reasoning that I was thinking of was maybe they intentionally designed Argenti to be simple. Maybe they kept this kit pretty basic and pretty bare bones because they wanted Argenti, this limited 5-star character, to be that way. That was going to be his selling point. And if that second reason is the case, I can kind of accept Argenti's kit being that way in that case, because if future characters aren't as simple, then Argenti will definitely have that uniqueness about him, being the 5-star limited DPS character with the most simplistic kit. So sure, that could be his niche, but I don't know, I just feel kind of bad for him, you know? Like, do you really want Argenti to be known out of all the 5-star limited characters to be the one with the most basic and most simplistic kit? I don't know, that doesn't sound right to me, especially for a character as elegant as Argenti is. So that's why I just feel a little bit disappointed. I feel like there's just one extra thing missing in his kit to make him a little bit more exciting. One immediate idea that I have is just give more incentive for the part of the kit where we actually have agency. Because at the moment, the only reason to use this 90 cost ult is to finish off enemies. But right now, I think in high MOC, you're probably going to want to save that 180 energy ult because you want to kill those elites. However, I'm hopeful that in the upcoming Pure Fiction game mode, the new endgame mode, that's supposed to have enemies constantly respawning, I could definitely see a world where it's actually much more valuable to use the 90 cost ult And because there's going to be so many enemies, you can just 90 cost ult, 90 cost ult, 90 cost ult, and keep ulting. And I think that would be a much more interesting way to utilize his kit. He would be the character with the niche with the lowest cost ultimate, so you can just get ults that much quicker. Now about that type of content, his kit still remains pretty simple. So maybe, I don't know, they could add some sort of stacking mechanic which stacks faster when you hit more enemies with your skill or ultimate, and maybe once you fully stack it, you get extra energy. Maybe, who knows? Some sort of extra mechanic like that that also fits with the theme of the already existing kit. Maybe that could be that extra umph that this character needs to be more interesting. But yeah, other than that, I think that's all I had to rant about. So yeah, like I said, Argenti is definitely a really strong DPS, and I would say a pretty valuable port if you need a DPS. His aesthetics looks pretty damn good as well, in my opinion. It's just that I'm quite underwhelmed with his actual kit. If you compare him with all the other 5-star limited characters that were released, and even the kits of the 5-star standard DPS characters, his character kit is the most simple out of all of them. His character kit, as it is the closest representation of the bare bones DPS character kit. His skill just does damage to all enemies, his ult does damage to all enemies. Everything just does damage, nothing special about that. And while other DPS characters do practically do the same thing, skill do damage, ult do damage, just deal damage, the other 5-star limited DPS characters at least have some sort of active gimmick that us, the player, can play around in the actual battle in order to deal that damage. And that special mechanic that each character has is what makes that character unique. Unfortunately, Argenti doesn't really have this gimmick. Much of his talents are just passive stat bonuses that are based on the amount of enemies, so out of your control. And the only part of his kit where we actually do have urgency is when we choose to either do the 90 cost ult or the 180 cost ult. But even the game itself heavily disincentivizes this choice due to the damage difference that it has. And it is only in fringe cases where you actually choose the lower cost ult. So in reality, there is kind of an illusion of choice with his ultimate. So compared to all other 5-star limited characters in this game, his kit is the most basic and the most simplistic, which in my opinion is very underwhelming, especially for a 5-star limited character, which is supposed to be the biggest, next, newest, exciting thing in your game, the character that's being advertised. So despite his meta viability, I do find it quite disappointing that his kit is designed like this. But feel free to disagree with me. Maybe I missed something, maybe you've thought of some other counterpoint that you think goes well against mine. I am happy to be wrong. So yeah, mini rant over. See you next time.